What does this tariff storm mean for India? Let's get the conversation going. We have with us Amitendu Palit, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. And we also have with us Sanjeev Krishnan, Chairman at PwC, to take this conversation forward. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining in. Morning to both of you. So, Sanjeev, opening thoughts. Trump is trying to shift the world. He's trying to get American manufacturing back. But in the process, there's a lot of chaos. What do you make of the new tariffs that have been announced, particularly on a lot of the Asian countries, including India?
So I think the first thing first, I think this is obviously from a US standpoint, they are doing what they believe is good for them. I think from a Southeast Asian perspective, and particularly from an Indian perspective, I don't think there's need for us to be too disheartened, I would say, because this is something which is going to happen to multiple countries, and as we have seen in the news that came in last night, multiple countries are going to get impacted for it from the tariffs. Now, the question really is that what is our competitive advantage, and I think that's what one needs to focus on, because let's take imports into the U.S. Coming from Southeast Asian countries, etc. It's not only that India has been put on tariff, China, Vietnam, where the supply chain, the elongation of the supply chain was really impacting imports into the US. I think all of them have, all of the countries are getting impacted. So for us, I think the broad framework really from my standpoint, as we see it really is that we need to focus on our competitiveness on a go-forward basis. A few days back, we came up with what we call an ideas framework, which is where we need to be able to continue to invest and also diversify our export portfolio to make sure that India mitigates the impact of some of these tariff regimes, which of course any country, in this case US, will continue to do in what they think is best for them.
Absolutely. No, take your point entirely, Sanjeev. I think the first order impact for India is not that great, but it's not that big, but it's the second and third order effects that I think we're far more worried about. Amitendu, let's get your thoughts in as well. So take Sanjeev's point entirely that I think, and for us, for now, for instance, pharma has been spared, others are being tariffed a lot more. But the issue is if the US consumer itself starts consuming less, because commodities across the board, products across the board are getting more expensive, then there is a hit on US growth, global growth, and then there is a market, storm to deal with as well. Equity markets overall, financial markets freezing up as this chaos plays out. So how significant would the second and third order effects be?
Thank you, Sivi. I think a real pleasure for me to join on this show and quote unquote best greetings on what is being called the Liberation Day by President Trump. I would bring in 2 points to the thought that you shared. The first is that you did mention about the impact this is going to have on the US economy domestically, what's going to mean for the US consumers. And I think to that extent, President Trump has already made it pretty clear in a few interactions that he has had over the last 1 month that there is going to be short to medium term pain for all the measures that he is bringing in. So it's in a way sensitizing the US consumers about the fact that, look, tough days are ahead, but they're all for a better, brighter future. The American dream is going to come back. So that's his domestic narrative and rhetoric. What it means otherwise is obviously very significant. The United States growth is going to shrink. And it's not just the United States growth that is going to shrink. There is going to be a contractionary effect across the headwind inflation trajectories in many parts of the world because the supply chains are going to get badly impacted. But more importantly, Suvi, there's one point I want to draw your attention to. If you look at the tariffs that have come, the tariffs are not just tariffs. They are tariffs including trade barriers and currency practices. That's the heading on which this has been announced. And it's very interesting. If you, for example, it's very ad hoc in character. If you look at a country like Turkey, Turkey has been called out twice in the executive order because of the high tariffs it imposes on rice husk and apples. Yet, if you look at tariffs, the reciprocal rate for tariffs on Turkey is very small. It's just 10%. Whereas for many other countries, the rates are much higher. Now, this, I think, is where the crux of the matter lies. These tariffs are going to be bargaining chips by the US administration for taking out extracted concessions from its partners on several other areas which could be with respect to currency practices, which could be with respect to many other barriers. I think specifically for India, there are two areas of concern. The first is the quality control orders, which have been very reflected upon in detail in the foreign trade barrier report that was brought out 24 hours before the reciprocal tariffs, in number one. And number two, India does figure among the list of countries which the US administration considers are currency manipulated countries. So I think these are the two areas, and also subjects like government procurement markets, where the US would expect concessions. Those are difficult policy areas for India to address. I think that's where the real risk lies.
Absolutely. No, a point taken. Good morning, gentlemen. To the point of how they've arrived at these numbers, Prashant here, it looks like what they've done is they've taken the deficit, divided it by the imports, and that's how they've got to the number. So, the deficit with India is about $46 billion. US imports about $88 billion. So about 46 divided by 88. That's the 52% claim tariff number. So, I mean, if this is true, and many are pointing out that this is how they've arrived at that number, it's I don't know, I mean, what to make of it. But specifically, Sanjeev, if I can ask you, there are many who are saying that for countries, for sectors like textiles, Bangladesh is hit higher, Vietnam is hit much harsher. How would you respond to that? Because I'm assuming cost of making stuff in those countries is lower, and it's also easier in that sense, widely acknowledged. So is that actually a silver lining, that they are hit harder than us with regards to specific tariffs? Go on.
Well, I mean, I would say that, so that may be true. I certainly won't comment on what's happening there, but I would only make one comment. Inefficiency in production anywhere, if that is leading anyone, could be us, could be anybody else, to do better in the short term. That's only going to be in the short term. I think the important thing really is that it's a call for Indian industry to become a little bit more efficient. And in some ways, I think it could be a paradigm shift in the way we look at our manufacturing over the years, etc. If manufacturing has not been our strongest space so far, it's again a call for action that, okay, figure out the logistics cost. Start thinking that scale is important, and big can be beautiful, and big can be better, because some of those will give us the efficiencies that will make sure that we are even more competitive in the global markets. You are right that in the short term, India possibly may not suffer as much, because there have been greater tariffs on some of the other neighboring countries that India has, particularly in the segments that you mentioned. But that's going to be only a short-term thing, and as is being said, some of these are going to be used as bargaining chips. I think from an India standpoint, I also feel a little bit more confident because we all know that a BTA is being negotiated at this point in time. Possibly the only country, at least to my mind, India is the only country with which US is actually negotiating a BTA at this point in time. So I have a lot of hope from that standpoint as well. But I mean, again, the moot point, and that to me is the underpinning. It's a call for action for us to be a little bit more efficient and to make sure that our trade interests are protected, which I'm sure the government of India is doing at this point in time.
Yes, absolutely, gentlemen. I mean, back-channel parlays will definitely, take place, and let's see where this eventually ends. Thank you so much for joining in with some opening thoughts, at least, on this very, very busy morning and very, very chaotic morning, might I say, from a market standpoint.